everyone has to know your politics. When I kind of used Johnny's model, people couldn't figure out, well, you and your Republican friends, well, Mr. Leno, you and your Democratic buddies, and I would get hate mail from both sides equally. And I went, well, that's fabulous.
Do you believe a legend can be untouchable? For more than 2 decades, Jay Leno has been the face of late-night television, the man who brought laughter to all of America. But behind the bright stage lights, his life has been a series of silent battles, from nights spent sleeping in a freezing car because he had no money to struggling with dyslexia as a child. He pushed through the brutal war for the Tonight Show seat, survived accidents that nearly took his life, and endured the heartbreaking loss of loved ones one after another. How can a man endure everything, never stop working, and still keep a kind, generous heart, living solely on the income from small comedy shows? This is not just a story about fame, but a profound lesson in courage and extraordinary discipline. Don't miss the story of the man who turned humility into a legacy. Hit subscribe, leave a comment sharing your favorite Jay Leno moment, and like this video so we can honor his unbreakable spirit together. Jay Leno, the giant of American late-night television and the iconic face of The Tonight Show, is one of the most resilient and influential figures in U.S. entertainment. For more than 22 years, his monologues were far more than comedy. They became a nightly rhythm woven into American culture with sharp wit wrapped in warmth. Jay Leno, the giant of American late-night television and the iconic face of The Tonight Show, is one of the most resilient and influential figures in U.S. entertainment. For more than 22 years, his monologues were far more than comedy. They became a nightly rhythm woven into American culture with sharp wit wrapped in warmth. At 75 years old, Jay now faces another difficult chapter, one even more challenging than many of the battles he has already overcome. The man who once brought laughter to millions of families continues to approach life with calmness and resilience. Jay Leno was born on April 28, 1950, in New Rochelle, New York, into a modest working-class family where sacrifice was simply a part of everyday life. His father, Angelo, worked as an insurance salesman, carrying heavy responsibilities to provide for the family. His mother, Catherine, a gentle Scottish woman, tried her best to bring warmth to their small home, despite the limited means. Jay grew up with his older brother, Patrick, in an environment that was not wealthy, but rich in lasting values, such as discipline, humility, and a deep belief in the power of perseverance. When the family moved to Andover, Massachusetts, Jay began to feel the harshness of the world toward a child who did not fit the mold. While his classmates breezed through their lessons, Jay had to battle with letters that refused to stay still, tangled words and pages that felt unpredictable. Dyslexia left him both determined and lost. He didn't fall behind because he lacked effort. He fell behind because he was trying to decode a world everyone else seemed to understand with ease. One day, a school counselor said something that would stay with Jay for the rest of his life. Education isn't meant for everyone. That sentence felt like a harsh verdict, powerful enough to crush the hopes of any child. Years later, Jay admitted school was very difficult, but making people laugh helped me get through it. In that confession lay loneliness, shame, and a deep desire to be understood. Comedy did not come to Jay because he was born gifted. It was the way a young student learned to survive. While other kids played or followed their own hobbies, Jay clung to laughter as the only thing he felt he could create in a world full of obstacles. He mimicked his teachers not to impress them, but to hide the fear that hit him every time he opened a book. He told jokes not to shine, but sometimes just to feel like he wasn't drifting away from everyone else. For Jay, humor became the only shield protecting a gentle, vulnerable boy from a world that had quietly decided his future would be less fortunate than others. In the small Andover house with peeling paint, worn-out furniture, and winter cold seeping through thin walls, Jay learned to hide his deepest sadness behind a smile. His mother nurtured his imagination, sensing the quiet storms growing inside her son. Jay's father taught him that effort, steady, persistent effort, could exceed any expectation. That lesson became the spiritual armor Jay carried for the rest of his life. Even as time passed, the difficulties never truly disappeared, but those very struggles forged an extraordinary determination within him. Every poor grade, every disapproving look from a teacher, every moment spent staring helplessly at a page he couldn't read became a hidden source of strength that fueled Jay's resolve. He absorbed his father's discipline, his mother's kindness, and from all those wounds, Jay created a momentum far greater than anything his circumstances ever allowed. What America would later call talent was actually born from years of being underestimated. His sense of humor became his signature not because of privilege or favorable conditions, but because of the resilience of a boy who refused to let others define his worth through the hardships of his childhood. But even as he grew older, life still did not spare Jay Leno. If anything, the challenges only became heavier, as if the world wanted to test just how much he could endure. In 1968, at 18 years old, he left Andover High School carrying a small dream and the lingering memories of the school days he had struggled through. Emerson College in Boston became his next destination, where he majored in speech therapy, a sensible choice for many, but not one that truly spoke to his heart. What truly kept him alive was the rhythm of comedy, the deep need within him to bring laughter to others. That instinct had once helped Jay survive classrooms filled with doubt about his abilities. Boston would bring him a little closer to that dream. But the late 60s were a harsh time for a young man with no money, no connections, and no one to lean on. Jay took any job he could find. He delivered pizzas in winds that cut like knives. He hauled heavy engine parts in drafty repair shops, then scrubbed his cracked, dry hands in a car dealership, where the smell of grease and the clang of metal slowly awakened the lifelong passion for machinery inside him. Those weren't stepping stones, they were real life. Every dollar he earned disappeared instantly into rent, gas, and meals so cheap that some days he had to skip eating just to get through. When things became too difficult, Jay slept in his car, an old rattling vehicle shivering through winter nights, separated from the freezing air by nothing more than a thin layer of metal. Frost clung to the windshield. His breath turned into pale smoke, and his fingers grew so numb he had to tuck them under his arms just to feel a hint of warmth. He wasn't considered homeless, but his life was only one step away from the edge. There was no comfort, no safety, just a young man curled up in the dark, hungry and shivering, trying to hold on to a dream not big enough to guarantee success, but far too precious to abandon. By 1973, at 23 years old and still a college student, Jay made his first quiet act of rebellion against the fate others had once assigned to him. He opened a small comedy club. It was nothing more than a cramped room with mismatched chairs, a simple stage, and a microphone that sometimes crackled. But it was a place that belonged to him. Between running the club, attending school, and working tough jobs, he began performing at open mic nights all over Boston. In smoky basements and neon-lit bars, Jay slowly discovered the harsh reality of the entertainment world. Talent alone was not enough. Some nights, only a few audience members showed up. There were nights when the silence after a joke felt heavier than any critique. Club owners sometimes brushed him off. "You've got no spark, you're just ordinary," as if they were repeating the same verdict Jay had heard throughout his childhood. One night, after waiting outside for hours in the freezing cold, he was rejected yet again. "We don't have time for the stage tonight," the owner said before shutting the door. The cold wind rushed in. And in those moments, the old voices came echoing back the words of the mentor who once dismissed him, the teachers who doubted him. Jay wondered whether the world was truly as kind as he hoped it could be. His days passed on borrowed sofas in faded old jackets, counting every coin in the palm of his hand, riding night buses through freezing streets, and spending long hours waiting outside clubs just to perform 3 minutes that sometimes left no impression at all. There were moments when he was exhausted and starving, wondering if anyone truly understood what lived deep inside his heart. But somewhere within him, a small flame, stubborn and steady, refused to go out. Every failure taught him the rhythm of life. Every closed door taught him endurance. Every night spent in that freezing car taught him a discipline no classroom could ever provide. Those years of poverty, cold, and uncertainty forged the strength of Jay Leno. Humor became the only shield that helped him fight off the feeling of being underestimated and the fear of being left behind. Jay didn't succeed because doors were opened for him. He succeeded because he kept knocking longer than anyone else. From those bitter beginnings, he built the resilience and work ethic that the world would later admire. In 1977, his first big opportunity arrived when Jay stepped onto the stage of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson for the very first time. Even under immense pressure, he made the entire audience burst into laughter, a turning point that changed his life forever. In the 1980s, Jay worked relentlessly early flights, late-night shows, standing on stages with the smell of beer still clinging to his clothes. Every time he performed, he feared that one small mistake could ruin everything he had worked for. In 1986, Carson chose Jay as a guest host. Behind the praise was the immense pressure of stepping into a role many considered untouchable. Yet Jay continued to carry the kindness and work ethic that had shaped him from the start. By 1992, Jay officially took over The Tonight Show. He kept his routine of reading the newspaper every morning, rewriting jokes and practicing until everything became completely natural. While everyone else rested, Jay was still racing from show to show, believing that laughter was something you had to work hard to earn. For 22 years, Jay brought laughter to more than 5 million viewers every night, helping NBC generate billions of dollars. He became famous for never being late and never canceling a taping. Behind the success were sleepless nights, cold cups of coffee, and the quiet loneliness backstage. Jay always pushed himself because he never forgot what it felt like to be the little boy who once felt invisible. By 2014, Jay's final night on The Tonight Show brought America to silence. When he said, "These have been the 22 greatest years of my life," his voice trembled, and for the first time, the audience saw the real Jay, the man who had given far more than they ever knew. Millions whispered 2 simple words: "Thank you, Jay." Jay's career was not only about success. It was also a battleground of misunderstandings, competition, and the immense pressure of occupying a legendary seat. The controversy that erupted in 1992 when NBC chose Jay instead of David Letterman proved that even legends must face storms. But Jay Leno stood firm because he was built from years of persistence, from the strength to rise above poverty, and from one simple belief: laughter can lift people up. Letterman, talented and widely admired, had long been seen as Johnny Carson's natural successor. The press fueled the rivalry, audiences took sides, and Hollywood buzzed nonstop. Meanwhile, Jay Leno, who only ever wanted to make people laugh, suddenly became the center of a nationwide debate he never asked for. He didn't lash out or attack anyone. He simply kept working even as every joke was scrutinized, every gesture compared, and every headline questioned his worth. For someone who had been underestimated as a child, those criticisms cut even deeper. And then with time, the storm began to fade. The audience gradually grew to love Jay's sincerity, and under his direction, The Tonight Show became a familiar source of comfort every night. But in 2004, NBC announced early that Jay would hand the show over to Conan O'Brien in 2009. Jay accepted the plan, though he carried a quiet sadness, knowing that one day he would have to leave the stage he had devoted decades to. In 2009, Conan took over The Tonight Show, and Jay stepped back. But when ratings dropped sharply, NBC panicked. A series of rushed decisions giving Jay a 10 o'clock show and then suggesting Conan move his time slot triggered one of the biggest controversies in late-night television history. The public split into sides, the news exploded non-stop, and Jay, who hated conflict, was suddenly portrayed as the villain, even though he hadn't created the situation at all. Every night, Jay saw cartoons of himself on the front pages. In his cold dressing room, he sat with a cup of lukewarm coffee reading accusations he had no idea how to respond to. He ultimately said just one gentle sentence: "I'm only an employee." He didn't blame Conan, didn't criticize NBC, and didn't try to rewrite the story to defend himself. He chose silence, and he chose to keep working. When Jay returned to The Tonight Show in 2010, he didn't come back carrying a victory. He came back carrying a weight. He slipped into the familiar rhythm again: early work days, late rehearsals, crafting each joke with the same meticulous care he always had. Some viewers welcomed him back, while others remained unhappy because the rumors had grown louder than the truth. Jay, who had always measured his worth by laughter, learned a painful lesson. There are wounds applause cannot heal. Even so, he kept standing. Refusing to give up was the way he prevented himself from becoming bitter. And in 2014, when Jay said goodbye to The Tonight Show for the final time, the tears in his eyes were not the tears of a victor, but of a man who had survived storms the public would never fully understand. He realized that success always demands quiet sacrifices, and even legends must endure their struggles in silence. Jay's greatest achievement wasn't ratings or money, it was the dignity that carried him through the harshest challenges of his life. Because sometimes the true measure of a person isn't found when they stand under the spotlight, but in how they face the storms that try to extinguish that very light. But Jay's greatest challenge came from his own body. In 2009, the long, relentless schedule caused him to collapse from exhaustion and be rushed to the hospital. Behind that simple diagnosis was a much heavier truth: years of pressure, constant filming, and the emotional strain from the late-night controversy had worn him down. In the hospital, Jay was no longer the late-night legend, he was simply a man who had reached the limits of what he could endure. Even after he recovered, Jay carried that sense of fragility for many years. After leaving The Tonight Show in 2014, he turned to his garage not to show off cars, but to find the peace that the spotlight could never give him. From 2015 to 2021, Jay's garage became the place where he stored his passion, his memories, and the stories he never shared. Every car was a piece of his life, like an old friend always waiting for him whenever he needed a place to breathe. Even the garage, the place where Jay found peace after the spotlight, couldn't protect him from a new trial. In November 2022, while repairing a 1907 steam-powered car, a fuel line suddenly failed, spraying gasoline that ignited in an instant. The flames burst violently, spreading across his face, neck, and hands before he could react. Jay was stunned in pain and nearly disoriented, yet he still fought to put out the fire in the chaos. When Jay was taken to the hospital, he was in serious condition with severe burns. He had to undergo multiple procedures, heavy bandaging, and long periods of treatment. The nights in the burn unit were especially difficult, the lingering pain making it nearly impossible for him to sleep. But Jay stayed determined, spending hours in the hyperbaric chamber, practicing steady breathing and keeping his spirit strong. 9 days later, even though he was still in pain and still healing, he returned to the stage not because of pressure, but because of his love for the craft and his gratitude toward the audience. If you agree that Jay Leno's resilience is truly inspiring, comment 1. If you think he should have taken more time to rest, comment 0. Enjoy the full video and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support our channel and help us continue bringing you more emotional and meaningful stories. Less than 2 months later, Jay faced yet another accident. In January 2023, while riding an antique motorcycle, he didn't see a wire stretched across the road. The impact threw him hard onto the pavement, leaving him with a broken collarbone, 2 fractured ribs, and a knee injury. For someone in his 70s, those injuries could easily have taken away his independence. And yet Jay chose to get back up heel, step by step, and soon returned to performing. At the end of 2024, while still in the middle of his recovery, Jay faced yet another accident. He slipped on a damp slope. The fall left him badly bruised with a broken wrist and several other injuries. He lay motionless at the bottom of the hill in pain, then with that familiar determination forced himself to rise and climb back up on his own. Doctors later confirmed multiple injuries, but Jay received the news with the same calmness that had carried him through his entire life. Even though his body was tested again and again, Jay never allowed pain to stop him. He continued to keep his promise to the audience, showing up with that familiar smile, the smile that helped America get through countless upheavals over the decades. Because for Jay, real strength isn't about avoiding challenges, but about rising every single time he falls. In the end, Jay Leno's greatest battle wasn't just overcoming injuries. It was facing the moment when age begins to push back against willpower. It is the fear many older people carry, but few dare to say out loud when the heart still wants to move forward, but the body can no longer keep up. And in that very challenge, Jay's truest qualities shone the brightest, resilient, steady, and never allowing circumstances to define who he is. The greatest fear of growing older comes in the moment we realize the strength that once carried us is slowly slipping away. But Jay Leno does not face that truth with bitterness. He chooses a gentler kind of courage, continuing to move forward in a body that is no longer agile, continuing to rise even when every motion might sting, and continuing to smile even when that smile passes through memories of fire and impact. He left behind a powerful lesson: growing older is not a loss, it is a test of the spirit. The body may weaken, the steps may slow, but as long as a person still has the strength to stand back up, they have not been defeated. By Jay's side has always been Mavis, a quiet yet unwavering love. They met in the early 1970s at the Comedy Store when Jay was just a struggling young comedian and Mavis was a passionate activist. It wasn't a lightning strike romance, but a gentle realization that they belonged to each other. Their wedding was simple and unpretentious, yet filled with a deep sense of connection. For decades afterward, as Jay's career carried him far from home, Mavis remained the one waiting through long nights, worried but never complaining. Jay, in return, cared about her world as well, her ideals, the people she fought for, the causes she protected. They chose not to have children, a decision that felt right for them when they were young. But as they grew older, the quiet of a home with only two people sometimes revealed a subtle, lingering emptiness, gentle yet impossible to ignore. In 2024, Jay began to notice small but troubling changes in Mavis, forgetting her favorite book, mixing up dates, losing the thread of a story. At first, he tried to stay optimistic, but the delayed recognition in her eyes told him this wasn't just ordinary aging. One day, Mavis stood up too quickly and nearly fell. Jay rushed to catch her, even though the knee he had once broken sent a sharp pain through him. She leaned completely on his arm, unaware that the man holding her steady was also quietly hiding his own lingering pain. And in that moment, Jay understood that his battle had never been only about surviving burns or broken bones. It was also about standing against the fragility of time for both himself and the woman he loves. After all the accidents and injuries Jay had endured, he thought he had grown used to pain. But nothing could have prepared him for the moment the words "progressive memory loss" echoed through the examination room. Jay didn't cry. He simply held Mavis's hand and told her he would take care of her. On the way home, she kept asking, "Where are we going?" as if her memories were being wiped away with every blink. That hurt Jay in a way no fire or broken bone ever had. It was the pain of watching the person he loves slowly drift away piece by piece. That night, he opened their wedding album and looked at a photo of the two of them when they were young, hoping he could hold on to a part of their memories for both of them. Jay understood that this was the one battle he could never win, a battle he couldn't run from nor laugh his way through like he always had before. He became her guardian in every sense, emotionally and legally. He signed documents with trembling hands, set up a trust, and prepared for a future he wished he never had to imagine. During medical appointments, Jay sat beside her listening as doctors discussed long-term care, feeling the quiet ache of the empty space where a child might have been sitting with them. At home, Jay cared for Mavis in every small, tender way, fastening her buttons with hands that once endured skin grafts, steadying her down the stairs, even though his own knees still hurt, holding her close when she panicked because she no longer recognized the familiar hallway. On the nights when her memories faded the most, he would replay old clips of The Tonight Show. Mavis looked at Jay on the screen and whispered, "He's funny," not realizing she was watching her own husband. Jay simply smiled and said, "He did his best." Sometimes she asked, "Have we met before?" And Jay, a man once recognized by millions, had to swallow the ache in his chest and answer softly, "Yes, sweetheart. We've known each other for a very long time." There were no children standing beside them, no one to take shifts or share the weight of decisions. It was just Jay and Mavis as it had been in the beginning, but now walking through the dimming light of memory instead of the brilliance of youth. The home that was once warm with late-night returns now held only the soft shuffle of slippers, the quiet clinking of pill bottles, and Jay's gentle voice explaining everything to her for the third, sometimes the fourth time of the day. Jay cared for Mavis day by day, arranging her medication in the late afternoon light, with hands that had already endured many injuries. At night, he sat beside the bed watching her sleep, trying to memorize every line of her face, as if afraid time might take something else away. On the days they walked together in the garden, her steps were unsteady. His knee ached sharply, but they still held hands, keeping the promise they had made to each other when they were young. In the moments when she looked at him as if he were a stranger, Jay learned a lesson that even his brilliant career could never teach him. Love is not proven on peaceful days. It is proven in the most fragile ones when giving up would be easy, but you choose to stay, to care, to lean toward one another. All of America knows Jay for comedy classic cars and a legendary career. But only one person has ever truly understood his heart, and that person is slowly forgetting him. Jay spent a lifetime making sure audiences would remember his name, yet now all he wishes for is that Mavis might remember him for just one more morning. And if the day comes when she no longer does, he will still sit beside her, hold her hand, and whisper softly, "It's me. I'm right here." Because real love doesn't require memory, it requires presence. Alongside that quiet pain, Jay has also had to face the losses from his own past. Over nearly 10 years, he lost the 3 people he loved most, all to cancer. The illness became a shadow following him, a single word that tightened his chest every time a doctor hesitated to speak. First was his mother, Catherine, the woman who had always lifted him with gentleness and hope. Even when illness drained her strength, she still mended his clothes, still passed on her belief in him. When she passed away, Jay lost the compass that had guided him through his youth. Less than 1 year later, cancer took his father, Angelo, the last pillar of his childhood. Jay spent what felt like entire weeks living inside the hospital, listening to the steady rise and fall of the ventilator, watching his father grow weaker and feeling the quiet collapse of his own inner world. During those long months sitting beside the hospital bed, memories from his childhood returned more vividly than ever. He remembered standing on a wooden crate in the garage, looking down into the engine of an old car, while his father, Angelo, shined a flashlight across every detail. The smell of engine oil, the clang of metal, and Angelo's large hands guiding Jay's small ones over each bolt, that was the soundtrack of his entire childhood. The greatest lesson his father ever taught him was simple: if you start something, finish it. Watching that once strong man struggle just to lift a glass of water hurt Jay in a way words could never express. He visited his father every day, adjusting the blanket, helping him sip water, steadying the bed so he could move without pain. They spoke less than before, yet the silence carried everything that didn't need to be said: love, gratitude, and the memories they shared. One night, Angelo held his son's hand and whispered, "Don't go yet." It was the last time Jay ever heard his father's voice. When he passed, the house felt so empty that Jay had to grip the door frame just to keep his balance. He placed his hand on the chair his father once sat in and understood something clearly. From this moment on, he was the last one left to hold the stories, the memories, and the love of their entire family. 8 years later, cancer came for the last person Jay had left, his brother Patrick, the one who had protected him since childhood, who once split a simple sandwich with him in their bedroom, who shared boyhood dreams in the dark. When Jay received the news only minutes before stepping onto the Tonight Show stage, he felt himself freeze. At night, he went to the hospital and retold childhood stories, not to comfort Patrick, but to hold on to the pieces of the past slipping away from him. When Patrick passed, Jay sat in his car with his forehead pressed against the steering wheel. He didn't cry, the pain was too great to turn into tears, and he sat there for a very long time, just learning how to breathe again. What Jay carried with him after that decade was not only loss, but the bitter truth that cancer had taken every person who helped shape him. And even so, night after night, he still stepped onto the stage, bringing laughter to millions, while his own world remained painfully silent. Jay understood deeply that fame is no shield, and life doesn't pause even when your heart has completely broken. Perhaps the deepest truth in this chapter of Jay Leno's life is something very few people have the time or the heart to truly understand. Strength is not the absence of sorrow, but the courage to walk through it. We do not become strong because we are untouched by pain, but because we choose to keep moving even when our hearts have already been cracked. Love can still exist in the most fragile spaces where memories fade, where the present sometimes grows dim, and sometimes the bravest act of all is finding your way back to the light, after life has forced you to walk through darkness far too many times. Now, at 75 years old, Jay Leno is living a quieter chapter, one far deeper than any of the brilliant moments that came before it. A chapter no longer measured by applause, no longer dependent on ratings or stage lights, but built on perseverance, generosity, memory, kindness, and the quiet courage it takes to wake up each morning and choose to keep moving forward. His body carries the scars of fire, of broken bones, of surgeries, and of time itself. But his life, built on more than half a century of relentless determination, still stands tall with quiet pride. His net worth, more than $450 million, is astonishing, not because of the number itself, but because of the journey behind it. From a dyslexic boy who once slept in old cars to the iconic late-night host of America, Jay lived entirely on his stand-up earnings for decades and never spent a single paycheck from The Tonight Show. He worked with relentless discipline, saved carefully, invested wisely, and built his career not through extravagance, but through a level of self-control that turned him into a legend. His properties reflect refinement and peace rather than showmanship. His Newport mansion faces the ocean in gentle, calming light. His 2 homes in Bear are modest but warm, filled with memories and simple belongings. But the true heart of everything lies in Burbank, a vast complex that feels like an entire universe of Jay's own. His garages stretch one after another, like mechanical cathedrals, where nearly 200 cars rest under warm golden lights, each one telling a story, a moment in history, a dream. There are steam-powered cars from the early part of the last century, glowing like relics from a forgotten world. There are the McLaren F1, the rare Duesenberg Lamborghinis so scarce they can be counted on the fingers of one hand, and futuristic prototypes that spark the imagination. Vintage motorcycles, restored mechanical tools, and boxes filled with handwritten notes. Everything bears Jay's imprint, his hands, his breath, his unending passion. Beyond all that scale and spectacle, Jay's life remains remarkably simple. He still drives himself everywhere, still wakes up early, still works in the same old denim shirt and worn-out boots. Injuries that might make others retire have only given him more reason to persist. His knee throbs after shows. His left hand stiff since the burn accident still grips the microphone tightly. For him, comedy is not just a profession. It is his lifeline, the thing that keeps him connected to the world. For many years, Jay quietly helped people in need. He supported veterans' children's hospitals, burn centers, mechanical engineering funds, and medical organizations without ever asking for recognition. He folded checks neatly and handed them to those who needed help, just as he always said, "If you have more than you need, share it." Because he and Mavis have no children, Jay has chosen to dedicate most of his wealth to charities, scholarships, and public programs after making absolutely certain that Mavis will be fully cared for. But within all those grand decisions remains the quiet sorrow he carries each day, Mavis's memories slowly drifting away like early morning fog. The burns sting each time he buttons his shirt. His knee locks up whenever he helps her stand, and every time she looks at him with confused eyes trying to remember who he is, another small crack opens in his heart. And yet even amid all that breaking, there is still tenderness. Jay makes breakfast with a hand that trembles ever so slightly. He reads to her in the soft light of late afternoon. They walk slowly through the garden hand in hand, and each time she forgets her own name, he whispers, "It's all right. I'm here." Their love is no longer dazzling. It has become a promise preserved in the smallest moments. And in those moments, the persistence, the presence, the kindness we see Jay Leno's true legacy. Not the cars, not the money, not the fame, but the steady courage of a man who never stops moving forward. A man who teaches us that success is built quietly day by day, that love can endure even when memory fades, that family lives on within us even when the people we cherish are no longer here, and that age, even when burdened with sorrow, can still shine with dignity. So as we close this chapter of an extraordinary life, may his story remind you of the strength within yourself, the losses you have survived, the victories you have earned, and the love you carry each day, even when life feels unbearably heavy. Jay Leno's legacy is not the cars or the massive ratings, it is the lesson of discipline and resilience. From nights spent sleeping in a freezing car to overcoming accidents and personal tragedies, he proved that dignity and kindness are undefeatable. No matter how many times life tested him, Jay Leno chose to rise, to keep giving, and to live with integrity, leaving behind the legacy of a man who never gave up. He taught us that true success is built quietly. Now, we want to hear your story. What challenge have you overcome with a never-give-up spirit like Jay Leno? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you love stories of resilience, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss the next video.